Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Ukraine launched a revenge attack on the Russian facilities, including power plants, oil refineries and storages, plus military targets. Kabooms were reported in Kursk, in Rostov-on-Don, Volgograd and even Astrakhan, which is quite far away from Ukraine. For all of that stuff, Ukraine used the long-range drones like Beavers. Because of the YouTube restrictions, I have to blur the video, but here is the Russian oil refinery and storage facility in Volgograd. Judging on those images, which you, by the way, may find on my Telegram channel, the facility is totally kaputted. Just a single drone might launch a chain reaction in those very flammable facilities. And here we have the video from Astrakhan. Locals filmed the Ukrainian drone Beaver, which flies to meet the Russian military infrastructure. So Beavers have the stabilizer on the front. It is unusual construction, but those drones are quite effective. So that particular drone went to the Russian training military facility. It is good that eyewitnesses present those videos to us. Also, many of the Russian electrical substations were hit in Voronezh and Rostov oblasts. Again, the drones were used for those strikes. Unfortunately, Ukraine is still out of the permission from the United States to use, for example, ATACMS missiles against the Russian military bases. We are not even speaking about oil refineries. It's better to target the Russian bases, and those are many within the ATACMS range. Remember, we were speaking about one of the biggest Russian ammunition storage. It is located in Voronezh Oblast, and recently it was hit by Ukraine. So now the satellite images were released, so it is before the strike and it is after. Because of the chain reaction and huge fire, the storage is completely gone. The same happened with the Russian Melitopol airfield, and I'm quite surprised to see some sort of the aircraft on the apron stands. The satellite image is not that detailed, but those could be the old Ilyushin-76 airplanes which ceased flying long time ago. And because of the strike, there was the wildfire which caused the damage to those airplanes for sure. Russia actually evacuated all of their flying aircraft from this particular airfield, but nevertheless they kept some of the military units out there. Not the airplanes, but it was the Russian military base. At the same time, the White House officials stated that they will keep restrictions on Ukraine for the ATACMS missiles, unfortunately. This Ukrainian Beaver drone unfortunately didn't make it to the target. It landed somewhere in the field of Volgograd Oblast. Guys, if you like the job that I do on YouTube daily, you may also consider supporting me on Patreon, because you keep me motivated out there. With the recent restrictions that I have on my channel, definitely Patreon helps me to make my videos. So thank you for your kind support. The governor of the Belgorod region, Gladkov, called civilians to evacuate their children from Oblast. He says about it because the situation for them is uncertain. Ukraine targeted lots of the substations and electrical power plants. So now there are lots of the blackouts in villages, towns and cities. I think that yesterday's Russian strike on Ukraine was the final drop for Ukrainians' patience, and now Ukraine started to target power plants. Well, Ukraine actually did it before, but only those substations which were close to the Russian military facilities and supplied those. But the last night, many of the ordinary Russian electrical facilities were hit, which led to the massive blackout, and governor is scared about the situation, because actually for Russia it's more painful to lose the electrical power facilities than for Ukraine. You see, Ukraine still obtains the help from our allies, including the spare parts for the electrical power plants, and there is a massive delivery of generators, inverters, batteries and so on, which help ordinary people to survive. Well, the most of the private stuff our people have to buy using their own funds, but nevertheless those are available on the market. But Russia is under the sanctions, and the equipment they have in their power plants and substations is usually the Western-made, mostly German-made. So for them it's very hard to repair those facilities. They simply do not have factories to produce the equipment as they used to produce during the Soviet times. All of that was replaced with better quality Western technologies. Plus, obtaining the good quality generators and batteries for civilian people is much harder and more expensive. I think that only China might supply that stuff to Russia, but it is also getting complicated, to do business with China, because China afraid to get under the secondary sanctions. They already got many of the warnings from the United States that their banks are working with the Russian banks or or in the Moscow stock exchange market. And according to the general expert opinion, China will leave that stock exchange market very soon. So the situation for Russia is actually deteriorating, including their army. Russia continued to spread their nonsense in the United Nations. The representative Nebeza said that the children's hospital was struck by the Norway-made NASAMS air defense missile, which is absolute lies because there are tons of the videos showing that it was definitely the Russian missile Ha-101. Launched from the Russian strategic bomber Tupolev 95, it was proved by all of the independent experts. And by the way, the United Nations recognized that as well. But Russia, no, as usual. Because the Russian media propaganda is unable to cope with that pressure from the international community and the evidence presented, they again start their Nazi aggression against Ukraine. Here's what their propaganda leader Solovyov says: "I would wipe Odessa, Mykolaiv, Kharkiv and Kiev off the face of the earth." Because they attack Crimea from Odessa and Mykolaiv, and from Kharkiv they attack Belgorod. And Kiev is the center where decisions are made. Yes guys, it is shown just on their TV, on one of the most popular channels, primetime evening TV show. So for now, Russia is just a greedy, bloody, inhumane state which should be reformed. And I still don't know how politicians are visiting Moscow. For example, the Indian Prime Minister Modi visited Moscow by the time of the Russian strike on Kiev and also on other Ukrainian cities. Yep, it was kind of the warm meeting. Those pictures of the meeting were posted on Modi's official page, how he hugged Putin very warmly. He even thanked the dictator Putin for receiving him, and some words about friendship between India and Russia. And here, by the way, there are lots of the comments under his page saying that this guy is wrong. You support aggression, you support the killer. If you support fascism, you're a fascist yourself. So people shared their opinion, and I also call you to do it on Modi's page. Because by the time Modi already knew about the strike, well, I think that they should feel the anger of the people in that case. They also need to know that if they go to Russia to meet Putin, they'll be cancelled. At least partially. Not by their own people, understand, mostly they don't care, but by the Western society. And later on, under this huge pressure, which actually we created, me, you and other guys from the democratic countries, Modi had to say about the innocent children. He might have added which suffer under the Russian strikes, but he didn't say so. But everyone there, including Putin, understood that he was speaking about the particular case of the Russian strike on the hospital yesterday. He says that it is terrifying, and I had a detailed discussion on this issue with you. And probably there was the cut of the video by Reuters, but it is kind of interesting.
Спасибо.
Спасибо means thank you. Well, I think it's the edition cut done by Reuters, but maybe it happened in real life, who knows? Look at this ugly, ugly dictator. So actually with yesterday's attack, Putin framed his friend Modi, plus his friend Orban, who went to Moscow for some sort of the peace agreement. But how can you make peace with Putin at this stage? Alright guys, let's go to the other news. Poland considers transferring additional MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. Absolutely great and fantastic news. Recently, Ukraine lost a couple of those airplanes because of the Russian Iskander missile strikes. But Ukraine is unable to reach its goals without military aviation. So our allies know about it, and those news are just fantastic. Well, they still just consider it, but if they say like that, it means usually that the decision has already been taken. And Ukraine will obtain those fighter jets. MiG-29s are the great jets. If we speak about the general aircraft capabilities, but the range of the radar is not so good, and also avionics is quite old. So obviously F-16s are much better. The New York Times came out with an article saying that Russia is unlikely to gain lots of the ground from Ukraine any longer. Well, simply Russia is out of the resources, their forces are poorly trained, and they constantly lose lots of the vehicles in the useless mid-wave attacks. Yes, still they may take one village, one field or something, but at the same time with tremendous losses, as I continue to tell you in every of my videos. So the cost of the land is tremendous for the Russian army. The situation like that may continue not for a long time, and Russia will be forced very soon to concentrate on defending the territory which they gained. On the other hand, Ukraine also doesn't have the tremendous resources to conquer Russia with significant counteroffensive. So according to the article, we are coming closer to the status quo. As, by the way, it happened in 2014, and later on that situation led to the Minsk agreements. But it is just the step of one more escalation from Russia. It will be postponed by several years, but Russia has its strategic goal to occupy Ukraine or to put its puppet government in Ukraine, which is basically the same. For this reason, Putin started to talk about the ceasefire because the Russian army is just incapable. He wants more ground, but he wants to reach it during the negotiation period, which might start if Trump gets power in the White House. He could bring tremendous uncertainty not just for Ukraine, but also for United States and NATO. So at this particular moment, it's hard to predict, but what we know for sure, and I would agree with this article, that Ukraine and Russia are running out of the resources to achieve their strategic goals. But I personally think that it will not lead to some sort of the frozen conflict. No, it will be a hot conflict with low intensity, but for a very, very long time, for many years. Like for example, it happened during the First World War. Then soldiers mostly spend the time in the trenches with no any movement, but after all, even that cannot last forever and one side should be victorious. In this case, I am sure that Ukraine will win, simply because of the major support from the other countries. And by the way, with yesterday's attack, Putin showed that Ukraine needs more of the air defense systems, so the United States of America already announced that they will transfer one more Patriot system to Ukraine. So whatever Putin does on the front lines is actually not profitable for Russia. He started the offensive in Kharkiv region and now Ukraine has the permission to strike the Russian military facilities, yes, not with ATACMS but with HIMARS generalized missiles. And that feature completely halted the Russian assault and now they're forced to leave the ground, for example, in Volchansk, Liptsy, and some other settlements of the Kharkiv Oblast. And now Ukraine will obtain even more of the air defense systems, and I think Poland also decided to supply the aircraft to Ukraine, I mean MiG-29s, under the influence of the Russian strikes on Ukraine. The only way left for Putin to be successful on the front lines is to announce a new massive mobilization in Russia, but it is a very unpopular step for the Russian regime, so Putin will try to avoid it. They raise the salaries for mercenaries and for their soldiers instead. After all, the chance for them to receive that salary is very low, but the Indian Prime Minister Modi took some of his soldiers from the Russian army. He insisted that his soldiers should be freed, I mean the citizens of India. So those Indians went to Russia to earn the money, but later on Russia captured them into their army, saying that they have to fight, so they were kept in captivity. And now Modi released those hostages. Also, the New York Times says that for now the victory for Ukraine is to be more closer to the Western countries, European Union and NATO, but we see that NATO still hesitates to take Ukraine. First of all, I think that the reason is that there is the hot stage of the war in Ukraine, but in general the NATO countries agree on Ukrainian membership even right now. There is some resistance just from two of the countries, and it's not the Hungary or Slovakia, it is the United States of America and Germany. At least President of France Macron said like that after discussing that particular question with allies. Well, I got this information from the DPA, but they removed this information from their website. But we know that Macron said about it before, like several months ago. But we understand that definitely Germany and the United States were opposing Ukrainian membership in NATO. I don't think that something changed out there. The DPA is the German source, so yes, they deleted this information already on their website. Some interesting news from Saudi Arabia. It seems like they start to blame the Western allies if they start to confiscate the Russian assets. There is the Bloomberg article about the case where they rely on officials who definitely confirmed that Saudi Arabia might sell the European bonds in the case of the confiscation of the Russian assets. Mostly, as they say, French bonds, and it might hurt the economy of the European Union in general. So 100% there was the agreement between Russia and Saudi to pressure the European Union plus United States. Honestly, I think that it might be the powerful lever for the allies to seize the confiscation of the Russian assets and just keep them frozen in their banks or stocks. The total amount of the bonds which Saudi Arabia bought from the Western countries is unknown, but we know that for a single month, March this year, Saudi Arabia bought bonds from the United States for more than $130 billion for a single month. It is definitely crazy. As you see, Saudis have lots of the money and now they may blackmail some of the other countries. But at the same time, Saudi officials say that this information is not correct. It's basically fake. Well, we'll see in the coming months whether it's definitely true and whether the Russian assets are confiscated or not. Alright guys, and now let's go to the front lines update. It seems like Russians finally went to New York Village, or the small town they occupied a couple of the quarters. They already occupied some of the residential buildings and very close to the town center. The center is basically on this crossroad, so maybe Russians will finally occupy the entire town. At least there is the great possibility of it, and still their attack vector is quite narrow. So if Ukraine had enough forces, it would just cut this vector of attack, but now it seems like it is impossible. This Russian attack lasts from the beginning of the month, and for all of the time the attack vector of Russia is quite narrow, but it seems like Ukrainian military command decided not to counterattack in the place. And let's check out the timeline yesterday and today. If Russia is successful in New York and Lipivka, they might advance to Torsk from this side and also from this side, occupying all of this territory. So definitely it will be a tactical success for the Russian army, but not a strategic success at all, and this operation might take thousands of their lives. Also, it seems like Russia decided to go on attack in Kupiansk region. They advanced in Sinkivka before they tried to get the village under control directly from this forest, but now they advance from this side. And also they have the attack vector from this area as well, but because there is no place to cover, they have tremendous losses. We even have some of the photos from the place. Yeah, sorry guys, this video is from the other place, from Kurahova. And here you already see many of the Russian vehicles which has been destroyed, and Russia used their T-90 Prorыв mega ultra tank to take Ukrainian positions under control. It was driving with a very high speed. It seems like this field was demined already. Here we go with the zoomed in image. The crew of the tank was absolutely sure that they are safe, but the Ukrainian artillery was waiting for them. I know how our artillerists made this precise shot, but they hit right into the fast-moving tank from artillery system. I don't know how is it possible, but maybe Ukraine has those kind of the systems with the shells which might track the enemy vehicles. Sounds impossible, but we have the result. Shell went into the tank and tank evaporated with an absolutely huge blast. Sorry guys again for the blurred image, but this is the way how YouTube works now. One more T-90 Prorыв tank was hit by Ukrainian artillery again. This time it didn't kaboom like before, but was totally disabled by the shell. It happened in Zaporizhia Oblast, the southern part of Ukraine. In the Kharkiv region, Russia tried again to send the new reinforcements to keep the ground and not to retreat. This time they used not the China-made golf carts, but the armored vehicles and tanks, but for Ukrainian artillery and FPV drones it doesn't really matter. The result for them, as usual, as you can see here, Ukraine even used the cluster munition shells. Russia also tries to take the Novoselivka Persha under their control, so far unsuccessfully. However, the fighting is very close to that village. They have this new vector of advancement directly from the north, so again, if Ukraine had enough resources, it would be awesome jam just to cut this Russian advancement, but it is not happening. And this is the Russian convoy not far away from Novomikhailivka. You may see many of the Russian tanks and BMPs. As I remember, this convoy was ambushed around 1 week ago, but now we received the detailed image of the Russian wrecked vehicles. Alright my friends, and now please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so you help me a lot, and as usual I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.